Welcome to another episode of the Salt Talk. This is Jermaine Alberty, where we explore life at the intersection of faith, mental health, community, and transformation. Before we begin today's conversation, I want to offer a spoiler alert. Today's episode reflects on themes drawn from the television series Lucifer. So if you have not watched the final season or the final episode, you might want to press pause for this episode. Watch it first and then come back. Now, let me start with a statement about how I approach conversations like this, because I consider myself a theologian. According to theologians, Howard Stone and James Duke, I'm actually not unique in that regard. In their classic book, How to Think Theologically, they make a powerful claim. All Christians are theologians because they believe in God and live out some understanding of God in their daily lives. In other words, theology is not just something done in seminaries or universities. It happens in living rooms, in church pews, in hospital rooms, and sometimes even while watching television. Because wherever we ask questions like, why do people suffer? Can people be forgiven? Is redemption possible? We are doing theology. And that's why when I watch shows that carry religious or spiritual undertones, something in me begins to wrestle with the deeper meaning behind the story. And for me, one of the shows that sparked that reflection was Lucifer. This is Jermaine Alberty, and you're listening to The Salt Talk. So what fascinated me about the way Lucifer portrayed the afterlife was his depiction of hell. Not a place where people torture themselves. The show introduces the ideal of hell loops. Souls trapped in hell relive the same moment of guilt or regret again and again. The same mistake, the same betrayal, the same decision, over and over and over again. And the reason they cannot escape the loop is not because someone locked the door, it's because they cannot forgive themselves. And when I heard that concept, it immediately struck me that's not just television, that's psychology. And if we're honest, it's also human experience because many of us are living in what I would call mental hell loops. Moments we replay repeatedly in our minds, a decision we regret, a relationship that ended badly, a moment when we hurt someone. Even years later, the mind presses replay. Psychologists call this rumination, when the mind circles the same painful memory without resolution. And rumination becomes chronic. The brain begins telling dangerous stories. I am my worst mistake. That's not true. That's a loop. And loops feel permanent because they repeat. What becomes fascinating in the final season of Lucifer is that the show introduces a radical ideal. Hell loops can be broken, not through punishment, not through endless suffering, but through understanding, accountability, and compassion. When the soul finally confronts the truth of what happened, when they take responsibility for their actions, and when they allow themselves to experience grace, the door opens and they are able to leave the loop. And that sounds very familiar to anyone who works in pastoral care, mental health, or spiritual formation, because healing often involves the same steps, naming the pain, owning what is ours, and receiving forgiveness. Then stepping forward into a new story. But there's something else that struck me. Because if there are hell loops, there must also be heaven loops. Moments we replay because they filled us with life. The first time someone told you they loved you, the day your child was born, the moment someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. When we revisit those memories, something powerful happens in the brain. We feel gratitude, we feel connection, we feel hope. Those are heaven loops. But here's the challenge. Many people rehearse their pain far more often than their joy. We replay the hell loops daily, but rarely revisit the heaven loops. So, how do we begin shifting the loops in our lives? So glad you asked. 3 steps. 1, identify the loop. Ask yourself, what memory do I replay the most? Awareness is the beginning of freedom. 2, separate the event from your identity. You're not defined by the worst moment of your life. Mistakes are events, they are not your identities. Number 3, create intentional heaven loops. Revisit memories that remind you of goodness. Write them down. Tell those stories again. Gratitude is not ignoring pain, it is restoring balance. My friends, let me leave you with this thought. Some people imagine heaven and hell as places we experience only after death. But in many ways, we experience them every day in our minds. Hell is when we imprison ourselves inside regret. Heaven is when we allow grace, joy, and meaning to play in our lives. The real question is, which loop are you feeding? Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Salt Talk with Jermaine Alberty. If this conversation resonated with you, here are the 3 next steps. 1, identify one hell loop you're ready to release. 2, write down 3 heaven loops you want to revisit. And 3, share this episode with someone who might need the reminder that their story is not defined by their worst moment. Until next time, stay grounded, stay compassionate, and keep bringing a little more salt into the world. Grace and peace. This is Jermaine Alberty, and you've been listening to The Salt Talk.